Your Lordship and members of the court, I begin by saluting you all good morning. Your Lordship, it is a well-accepted altruism that it is only the wearer of the shoe who knows where it pinches the most. It is a further altruism that it is always darkest just before dawn. For the record, my name is Major Mugure of the Kenya Defense Forces. Your Lordship, you and I have walked step by step through this highly charged and emotive public criminal trial, right from PW1 to PW26, up to this very moment in time. I understand and fully appreciate the weight of expectations placed on the shoulders of your Lordship in the hearing and determination of this matter.
About my weight, that is my own.
Correct, Your Lordship.
Mitigation, please.
Correct, Your Lordship.
Yes.
Having delivered a verdict of guilt on all 3 counts, I respect that decision of the court, for it presently legally binds me in ways no one can possibly imagine. Nevertheless, and with tremendous respect to the court, in principle, I am unable to agree with the verdict. Consequently,
you have a right to appeal.
I know, Your Lordship.
Yes. After my sentence, then you'll have
I am very much aware of that, Your Lordship.
to appeal. And that one you understand.
I'm very much aware, Your Lordship.
So do you have any mitigation?
Your Lordship, it is for that reason that I have instructed my advocates not to challenge the legality or severity of whatever sentence you deem fit to impose on me, but to challenge only the convictions. And for that, Your Lordship, I thank you for your indulgence.
A judge reads a life sentence. The man who's just had it, a former Kenya Defense Forces major, stands up and tells the court he disagrees. Not with the length of the sentence, with the conviction itself. He killed his wife and 2 children in 2019. He planned it. He drove to a burial site 3 days before the murders to scout it out, and then packed their bodies into bags, into his boat, and buried them in a shallow grave in Laikipia. And when it was all over, when the court had heard everything and handed down a life imprisonment sentence, he showed no remorse. Not fake remorse, not manufactured tears for lighter sentence. Nothing. That absence is a story I want to sit with today, because a man who can plan the death of his own children 3 days in advance, execute it without hesitation, and then feel nothing worth performing afterwards, that's not just one broken man. That's a signal. And in a country burying a woman a day to femicide, it's a signal worth talking about and taking it seriously. Let's get the facts straight first, because they do matter. Peter Mugure was a major in the Kenya Defense Forces. In 2019, he killed his wife, Joyce Siombua Maua, 31 years old. He killed his 10-year-old daughter, Shanice. He killed his 5-year-old son, Peter Jr., also known as Prince Michael. This wasn't a fight that spiraled. The High Court found he'd hatched the plot before he committed it. 3 days before the killings, he visited the exact spot in the Githu where the bodies would later be buried, with another military officer scouting the ground. After the murders, He packed his wife and children into body bags, loaded them into his car boot, and drove them to the exact same spot. He was convicted this month, sentenced to life, and in the moments after sentencing, he told the court he rejected both the conviction and the punishment. His lawyer would later try to explain the lack of visible emotion, but the court's own language was blunt. His statement disclosed no remorse whatsoever. I want to be careful here. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not even going to diagnose a man I've never met from a news report. But I do not need a diagnosis to ask the question that actually matters for the rest of us. The real question isn't why one man did this. The real question is how many warning signs can a society ignore before one broken home becomes another headline? Not medically, not socially. What is it in how we raise boys, how we define manhood, how we let men carry pain in silence until it becomes something else that ends in a shallow grave in Laikipia? You see, for years now, there's been a conversation in Kenya about the boy child. You've probably heard it, often used defensively, almost as rebuttal whenever women's issues come up. What about the boy child? As if attention to girls' safety is a zero-sum game that leaves boys behind. But strip away all the defensiveness, and there's something real underneath it all. Kenyan boys are, in a documented way, growing up under enormous unspoken pressure. Research on adolescents in Kenya describes boys navigating puberty in shame and silence. One study quotes a boy saying that he thought the changes happening to his body, were a disease because no one had told him otherwise. Minimal supervision, peer pressure with no adult scaffolding, an expectation that manhood means self-sufficiency, control, and the total suppression of anything that looks like vulnerability. Kenya's government has actually started to acknowledge this formally. The National Male Engagement and Inclusion Strategy, running 2025 to 2030, is a first policy document to say explicitly that men and boys aren't just bystanders to gender equality efforts. They are a population that needs support in its own right. Here's the thing, though. Acknowledging that boys are struggling doesn't excuse what happens when the struggle cuddles into violence, and violence against women and children. It explains it. Those are different things, and Kenya's public conversation constantly conflates both of them. Either boys are the real victims and femicide is a separate issue, or men's pain is irrelevant and only women's safety matters. Both framings let us avoid the actual mechanism. The mechanism is this: a boy who's never been given a language for fear, humiliation, grief, jealousy, or failure grows into a man who has no language for those things either. He only has one register left. And that register, sadly, is control. So when a marriage falls apart, when a man feels his authority slipping, when the shame threatens to become public, the boy who was never taught to sit with a feeling becomes the man who eliminates whatever is causing that very feeling. And sometimes that sadly is a woman. And sometimes that would also be his entire family. And that language, or the absence of it, isn't taught in a classroom. Most Kenyan boys are not raised only by mothers or schools. They are watching fathers, uncles, coaches, pastors, commanders, politicians, whatever those men normalize. You know how they handle anger, how they talk about women, how they respond to being challenged becomes the curriculum long before anyone gives formal lessons about proper masculinity. Nobody sits a boy down and teaches him to suppress fear or treat control as the only acceptable response to pain. He absorbs it by watching the men around him do it and get away with it every other time. Peter Mugure was a KDF major, trained, disciplined, occupying one of the most rigidly masculine institutions this country has. And I want to be careful with the casual claim here. Institutions built around discipline and emotional restraint do not turn men into killers. Most men who pass through them don't become one, but institutions like that can make it harder for someone to express vulnerability or ask for help, and that's worth examining as one factor amongst many leading to this very issue. And this is not a verdict on the institution itself. Now, let's put this one case inside the bigger picture, because Mugure is not an aberration. He is a data point. In 2025, Kenya documented at least 220 femicide cases in just the first 3 months of that year. 129 women killed, which works out to nearly 1 woman a day. The National Police Service recorded 125 femicide-related cases across the year, with Central Kenya recording the highest count at 31, followed by Western at 30 and Nairobi at 17. And after March 2025, the government stopped publicly releasing consolidated femicide data. So, even those numbers are almost certainly a flaw and not a ceiling. Nobody currently knows the real count. Here's a pattern that should stop us cold. Most of these women were killed by someone they knew very well. A current or former partner, a family member, someone inside the circle of trust that's supposed to be the safest place a woman actually has. 59% of victims are between 18 and 35. As in, these are women building lives, careers, families, and in case after case, they were warning signs beforehand. Emotional abuse, threat, stalking, economic control. Survivors went to the families, to police, to religious leaders, to community elders, and they were dismissed or redirected to mediation, sent back right into the danger. That, sadly, is a national story. Now look at Mugure again inside it. A trained officer, a man with rank, discipline, and institutional respect. Someone who, on paper, represented control and order. And underneath that uniform, a man capable of murdering his own children in a premeditated act, and then feeling, or at least showing, nothing. The uniform didn't prevent it. That doesn't mean the culture that built the uniform caused it either. Violence like this comes from many overlapping factors, and most disciplined, controlled men never do what Mugure did. But it's a reminder that discipline and control are not the same thing as emotional health, and we shouldn't mistake one for the other. See, I keep coming back to that detail. That one thing that will be captured and spoken about a great deal. No remorse. Because remorse at a basic human level requires two things. It requires seeing the other person as fully real, not as an extension of your authority, your reputation, and or your control. And it requires being able to sit with the discomfort of having failed that person catastrophically. No single cause explains a killing of this nature. And it would be dishonest to pretend, otherwise. Because researchers who study intimate partner violence point to a whole cluster of overlapping risk factors. Childhood exposure to violence, untreated trauma, alcohol abuse, coercive control in relationships, easy access to weapons, rigid and or possessive relationship norms, untreated mental health conditions, social isolation from friends and family who might have intervened. Any one of those on its own doesn't produce Peter Mugure though. But stack several of them together, inside a culture that also teaches boys to never see a woman as a full interior life rather than a role she performs for him, and to never sit with the discomfort instead of eliminating its source. And you get conditions where this kind of outcome becomes more likely, not inevitable. Let me clarify. This isn't about individual pathology alone. Courts rightly deal with individuals. But we are not a court. We are trying to understand a pattern. A major who executes his family and shows nothing, sitting inside a country, loses a woman roughly every freaking day. Sitting inside a culture that treats the boy child as a grievance rather than a design flaw we could actually fix. And fixing it doesn't mean excusing men. It means asking earlier questions. What do we teach boys about anger before they're 25 and holding a service weapon or a kitchen knife? What do we teach them about failure, about jealousy, about a partner leaving? Do we give them any vocabulary for those states that isn't violence or silence? Because right now, too many boys get exactly one model: control everything and feel nothing. And if control sleeps, remove whatever threatened it. Peter Mugure lived that model to its absolute endpoint. It's an extreme case, but extreme cases are usually just the plainest version of an ordinary pattern. So, what would prevention actually look like? So what actually moves the needle? Beyond diagnosis. Teaching boys emotional literacy early. Not as a soft add-on, but as a core skill. Early intervention when a relationship shows signs of abuse, not after it's already escalated. Mental health support that people can actually reach and afford. Taking threats seriously the very, very first time they are made and not the third. Then we can enforce protection orders instead of treating them as paperwork. Family members acting on warning signs instead of waving them off as just a rough patch. And employers, colleagues, commanding officers, the people who see a man daily, recognizing escalating risk and saying something instead of staying silent because it's not their business. But sadly, none of that guarantees prevention. But all of it is more useful than the shock after the fact. In closing, a man stood in a Kenyan courtroom this month and told the judge he felt no remorse for killing his wife and 2 children. That sentence should not fade from the news cycle in a week or so, because it's a mirror, not for a broken man, but for society still deciding generation after generation what kind of men it's willing to raise. Kenya is losing a woman roughly every day. Some of those killings will be preceded by warning signs nobody has acted or will act on. Some will be committed by men who, like Mugure, seem disciplined, respected, in control right up until they want. If we want fewer verdicts like this one, the work isn't only in courtrooms. It starts a long time before that, in how we raise our boys to name what they feel. Because the only thing in their hands is control or a weapon or a shallow grave. That's the episode. Thank you for listening. This has been the Kenyan week that was. Barakatele.